Who died and made you incident commander?
I ask that of you all the time. Oh, that was the job I got after you fired me, Chris. Thank you.
I failed up in the world. Somehow.
Just for the record, I did not know, nor was I a part of any firing. Hey there, if you've joined the podcast today, my name is Chris Jarvis. I work with companies on employee giving and volunteering programs.
And my name's Jake McIsaac. I spend a lot of time thinking about public safety and restorative justice.
So we are having conversations here that we've been having for 20 years.
Yeah, the only difference now is we press record and share it with you.
Thanks for joining us.
On today's episode, we didn't actually know where we were going to end up when we started talking. But I, Jake, tell the story of when Chris betrayed me.
And I try to listen without making it all about me.
Shocker. Stick around. It's going to be a great episode. I've been thinking a lot about performance.
Okay.
Job performance, high performing teams. I've had a chance lately to work with a lot of high performing teams, both in a work environment, athletics, but not so. It's going to sound disparaging. I actually don't mean my team.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this is kind of like
outside of my work.
The university.
And I think
we talk a lot about that. Because you work with federal government, you work with
lots of different groups, taking a restorative approach to the everyday, sort of thinking about the conditions that teams are working in, not just the end product, because we tend to focus on productivity or how well the team's doing, or if they're winning medals and banners and titles and all of those kind of things, sort of those credentials that show that they're high functioning. And what we spend a lot of time doing is looking at the relationships actually behind that. So even when teams are excelling at what cost? Mm-hmm. What's the mortgage being paid in terms of the relationships?
Okay.
Who's getting a voice? Who's not getting a voice? How equitable are the teams? Do they function as just communities? And if not, what would help? What would make it better? What would make it work? And it's been really, really interesting lately. So particularly when I'm talking to some coaches, to think about the roles that people have on these teams and how we've flattened it out a lot.
Right.
And we've flattened workplaces out, and we've flattened families out. Like you can see that, I think, in a lot of our structures that were typically built in sort of on a hierarchy, or they were built to reflect other systems.
Yeah, the early primate communities would have a large male, and everybody else coalesced around that. And then we just built systems to facilitate that with the feudal system and kings and lords and all that kind of thing.
And now we pay attention to how people feel, and we flatten it right out. Mm-hmm. And we become really consultative, and we make sure that everyone's attended to and everyone has a voice. And then some coaches are like, so it's been really hard to coach now. It's really hard to win, actually, because we flatten things. So helping people find their roles and find out, how do you win? What do you do when things go wrong? But more importantly, how do you pay attention to the conditions required for things to go right on the everyday? So I've been thinking a lot about teams lately.
So that's interesting, because there's sort of what's required for the group to be successful versus the individual. And that goes along with this book that I've mentioned before to you, Pro-Social. Mm-hmm. And it's high-performing teams are not necessarily full of high-performing individuals who tend to be high-performing at the expense of other people around them.
Facts.
Yeah. They're high-performing because they care about the success of the group, because their own identity is tied to it pretty strongly. This is coming out of some Google work. But there's an angle to this that's very interesting to me, because I think about it often when you're, before we start recording or when we're talking, I will often reflect on something you experienced in light of my own experience. And I think that may be a way of making it about me, right? So there's a sort of
wait. So we're hearing that you make things about you.
Yeah.
If we could sort of have that news flash sound effect.
I think that may be a way of making it about me. Okay. So I'm trying to say that you could say, look, so those individuals need to understand that their needs may sometimes be subservient to the needs of the group, or that their sense of justice and fair play is secondary, but your work is very much about saying there's a primary voice. And I'm wondering about reflecting on that just in the way I interact with everybody, because my daughters, in their early 30s, they'll be with me and they'll say something and I'll reflect back a story that I think I'm trying to understand what they said. I'm trying to internalize it. And I'm trying to tell them I do. So I reflect it from my perspective because that's all I get to work with.
Mhm.
And they'll say, Dad, don't make it all about yourself. And I think everything's all about myself. This human experience is about me. There's no way I can see it from your point of view. I can understand when you articulate a point of view, but I can never comprehend the way your neural net takes in the world through your biological optics. There's no way I can do that. And so, first of all, I think I'd love to explore that a little bit with you. But on a team, how do you share a message? What's good for the team may be more important what's good for you, but at the same time, is it more profound than that? Is that person confusing justice and fair play into making it all about themselves? So justice for them would be them before others.
I think so. I wonder sometimes why we choose the justice pathway that we choose. So sometimes it is fiercely individual. It could be that I feel wronged and I want a pound of flesh. I want something to be made right.
Right. Somebody should hurt because
someone should hurt, right?
Yeah.
So, but sometimes people choose a pathway, I think, because they want to make it better for other people. And that motive is very different. And I see that quite a bit where, particularly on teams where they want to like whistleblower hotlines, communication pathways where in companies you could talk about financial mismanagement or who's stealing something. It could be like there's like the red zone whistleblower, someone's doing wrong. That's one avenue. Then there's the kind of things I care about this place and I see something wrong and I want this place to be better. But I don't necessarily want someone to get in trouble.
Right.
I should probably speak up to it. There's probably a lot more of those gray zone cases and circumstances that people want to bring forward and just don't know what's going to happen. So if I do this, will I get someone fired?
I think that's interesting. Again, this book that I keep talking about, it uses these, they call them core design principles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on this woman's work that she won a Nobel Prize for. Her last name is Ostrom. But anyways, the version of the way this works in a group would be you clearly define the boundaries, who's in and out, you define the group. And in this book right here, they take an approach of shared identity and purpose. Okay, so you have to establish that. And then the second one is equitable distribution of contributions and benefits, where we get nobody benefits more in the group than others, and nobody has to contribute more in the group than others. And we've been talking about that, how contribution and effort definitely affects fair play. And then the third one is fair and inclusive decision-making, which speaks to your hierarchical approach. No, anti-hierarchical approach. Yeah. Then you move to monitoring agreed behaviors. So we know what our purpose and our identity is. We're all pitching in and benefiting equally, and we're all participating in inclusive decision-making. So now we're going to monitor agreed behaviors in a non-restorative approach that looks like whistleblowing, because you do want a way to talk about it, which is really interesting. I was thinking as you said that in the 50s, people would have said, keep your nose clean, keep your head down, and mind your own business.
Right.
If you see something, whatever you do, don't say something. 9/11 happens, and then everybody
see something, say something.
We're all ratting on each other, right? Now, every Black family at a pool is getting arrested by the police in the United States because everybody's seeing something and saying something. So this principle here, monitoring agreed behaviors, sounds great. And I'll go to the other ones in a minute.
Those first four just sound like group norming. So when you start a meeting, you start facilitating, you start a workshop, oftentimes, in my experience, facilitators will do exactly what you just said. How do we want to learn today? What are some group norms? What do people need? And we attend to that. We build that list together. Oh, we need breaks, so we need to end on time. We need everyone's,
Right.
we need to respect the thing that are said in the room that stays in the room. Whatever those norms are, we list those, we put them up on the wall, and then we monitor that thing that we built together. So we've created that. So those first 4 tend to show up as a co-creation space. This is who we are together.
Okay.
This is what we're building together. And we are going to hold each other accountable to this thing that we just said, which I think is slightly different because we built that together than responding to the thing that in that way that's very flat in a system that you didn't build. So you walk into a workplace, you didn't actually build this thing together. There aren't any agreed and shared norms. There are just the norms of how we do it here.
Right.
So you either assimilate or you're not quite a fit. And so we have orientations. We bring people into our workplaces and we tell them how we do things here, which I think is normal. And we have to find ways to do that all the time. But the real opportunity, if we're building inclusive workplaces, we're also slowing down to say, how can you change who we are? How can we always be evolving instead of just give you the route line of, well, this is the way we do it here.
What if the
versus
evolution
how you do
is,
it somewhere else?
Yeah, you know what? I don't like our purpose or our shared identity. So we should become this to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'd have to say, well, that's not who we are.
Right.
How do you tell the difference between, we get a chance to evolve, which is a very slow process over millions of years,
Mm-hmm.
or we can just be somebody else. We can pivot into a hierarchical team dynamic with, retributive principles.
I think it does matter a lot to have some core guidepost of identity of who you are. Like if you were a hockey team and the new person who came on the team knew you were a hockey team and all of a sudden one day said, we should play with a soccer ball.
Yes. Yeah.
You'll be like, well, that's interesting, but that's actually not who we are.
I'm good. I'm really good at soccer ball.
Yeah.
And so if you don't give me a chance to do that, I can't be contributing. And I feel that's unfair. That's not just.
That is not just, but we should find you a place where you can do that.
Like
a soccer team.
Yeah. Okay.
So we should help you. I think you do this in your work all the time, is helping people find their highest level of contribution, not just the equal amount. So we don't all show up at, I have to work as hard as you have to work. I have to work as hard as I can.
Yes. In a context in which I have a high success rate versus don't put me somewhere where I'm no good all the time. I call that my high fail rate zone. So I'm pretty good on a stage behind a mic, but when afterwards, it's my fail rate goes I can feel it going. I'm having one-on-one conversations, and then we go to the drinks afterwards, and it's pretty much I go from a 10% fail rate to potentially 60 to 70%. Yeah.
So they need to get you out of the a driver, get them out.
Yeah.
Extraction team. That makes sense. I wonder if what we're talking about though, in terms of those 4 norms, what were some of the other ones? There were 8.
So here they were again. We begin with the shared identity and purpose, and they have a model here for bringing people in, obviously at that level and helping them. And these are not sequential necessarily. Equitable distribution of contributions and benefits. We're going to pitch in as we're able, and we're going to benefit equally as well based on that. And that does not mean the same. It's equitable, not equal.
Mm-hmm.
Fair and inclusive decision-making, monitoring agreed behaviors. So we're at that 4. Now we move to a space that you're very, very, you're very comfortable with this, but even more so. And I think it gets complicated here for most of the rest of us. Graduated responding to helpful and unhelpful behavior. So this is not, I almost said this is not sanctions, but Ostrom's original work that she did after studying all these very successful communities is graduated sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this sort of sense of, okay, well, we hit this level, but what I like about what Wilson and the co-authors did is they said, but there's also responding to helpful and unhelpful behavior, because you can move people along to better levels of leadership. Number 6, fast and fair conflict resolution.
Fast and fair. Okay.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
they go into some restorative stuff here. I think it could be a lot beefier, but that's good. And then number 7, authority to self-govern. Now, this one's really interesting because this then begins to turn on itself, and you take all the first 6 ones and you say, now your group is responsible for all of these 6 things. Nobody's going to come in and do it for you. You don't have to do it for anybody else. These are your principles. And then they have to have the agency to actually do that, which obviously freaks out some managers, giving agency to other people. Finally, collaborative relationships with other groups. So the idea is that how this group operates in sort of this pro-social, and I would say transformative way, restorative way, is contagious. And you can actually see that culture shift across other teams because of the way you act as a team towards teams sends a strong signal of norms in the group.
The self-governance piece is interesting to me because you see a lot of professional groups that regulate that way. So it could be groups of realtors.
Yes.
It could be
the oil industry, kind of
lawyers as a profession.
Right.
So you have a group of other lawyers who will hold, in terms of that society, will hold them each other accountable, and we'll test it out. And so when you start to say fast and fair, I think I get the reason behind it. You don't want it to fester. You want to recognize it. You don't want it to get worse.
Right.
I think the risk on fast is that it actually may not be fair because it will lack context. I think it's fast to start, but not fast to finish. It doesn't have to get to resolution. It just has to get to process. Something's happening, and we're going to be paying attention. And we're deeply committed to figuring out what's going on, what matters most about what's going on, what needs to happen to make things right. Like really asking different questions. What would have helped? What do you need?
Right.
Instead of just getting to resolution. But I'm going to have to read this. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's some good reflection. I'm going to go back. I've read it almost twice now, so I'm going to go back through it again. Getting back to the original piece, which was somebody on a team who thinks, look, I should be given more of an opportunity, but they're new. They just, in terms of straight up competencies, closing sales, getting things done, project man, whatever it may be, they're third tier, and there's lots of opportunity to grow. That's where they came in. But they see somebody who you're going to put somebody on a team to make something happen when the stakes are high, and that's good for the team, so we can all get paid to do the next thing, or we can win enough games to go to the next level. How do you talk to people who seem to be making it about themselves? Like me when I'm talking, and I don't feel like I'm making it about myself. I'm just saying it from the only perspective I have. And yet when I look at 2 other people, I can easily say, oh my gosh, she's making it all about herself. She should just, step back and just let the team benefit, even if she doesn't get to, contribute at this state, or he. But
I wonder if there are franchise players. Like sometimes we try to minimize the fact that the roles we play are very, very different. There are people who have to go out and deliver. And I think it is recognizing all of the different contributions in an equitable way, like not just the equal play time, but when you do have the opportunity, are you contributing in the way that you are most supported to be successful? If you're undertaking this work, do you have all of the required skills and supports to be successful? I think that's kind of important. And if you do, and you're still not successful, teams have coaches. Those are hard conversations that I think we are less comfortable with anymore. Like when it talked about how do you check in a measured approach?
Yeah, in both
that measured approach of a good and be had, right?
Yeah.
So you want to coach up and manage out.
Yeah. Okay.
Because those are both things that are paying attention to keeping the team healthy and functioning and going well, and that's someone's job too.
And that's reasonable. But when I'm the person being coached out, or off, and I look at it and say, but it's not fair because I could have performed if we just started using that soccer ball. It's just not fair that you all are stuck on this puck idea.
Right. Well, it's like when you coached me out, and I didn't have a
just for the
chance to. I
record.
didn't have. Well, no, we're doing this. We're going to do this now. I
Man,
didn't have.
this is the worst.
Well, you wanted more vulnerability. Here
No,
we go.
I did not. Those were other people's suggestions.
I remember when we were working together, and then I sat down with a individual who was not you.
We should have had a diddle moment where you went back in time. Okay. So you're sitting down with an individual who's not me.
Who's not you.
Where am I?
You were gone on vacation.
I was, yes.
And I sat down with a person who was on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought we were meeting just to check in. And they took the opportunity to tell me that we were parting ways. And, a whole bunch of feelings in this moment.
Yeah.
Betrayal.
Not right now, though, right, Jake? Just for the audience, it's
we've worked on it over the last number of years, but every once in a while it burns. I felt betrayed. I felt surprised. I felt shocked.
Absolutely.
Ambushed. A whole bunch of things, right? So I think the place is really important for these kind of conversations. The notice for these conversations. You have to see them coming. I did not, so I felt ambushed. But the conversation was mostly about fit. That he or the board or you, whoever it was that was deciding it, because no one owned it, which was when no one owned it, everybody owned it. That's why I got angry. No one would own the fact that, well, if I'm not a fit here, and I didn't even get a chance to figure that out. Someone's decided that I'm not a fit here. Right. Felt really hard. Really hard.
Right.
When I look back, it's probably not wrong, actually. The process was awful, but the conclusion was absolutely right.
Yeah.
It got me unstuck. I was able to go do other things. I think about some of the painful exits that I've had along the ways, whether those are relationships or that's jobs or those transition points. Some are by my own choosing, and some, like when you get your friend to fire me, wasn't. They did open up something, a reflective space that I got to think about. Who do I want to be now? What's the next opportunity? It's just hard to do that when you're really angry. Like, probably not thinking, your brain's not really firing in all the right ways.
Yeah.
So I had to take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And little do I know.
Okay, so
you're like, what happened?
I don't want to make this about me.
Yeah, I know you would. I'm going to set you up for it. You're on vacation.
Yeah. Okay. So when did I find out you were fired?
Well, as the story goes, when you got back.
No.
I thought so.
No, when you got back, I was told that you had moved on, or you were moving on. And you and I exchanged, I don't know, a few texts, or this was early cell phone days. It was very cryptic. No, I'm good. Blah, blah, blah.
It's about 75 cents a text message probably back then.
I didn't see this guy for basically a year. I remember where I was in the Blockbuster picking out a movie.
And we were very close.
We were incredibly close. And we started having this conversation. And you said, fired. I said, what? And you said, yeah, because Ron and Barbie had Ron. What? I didn't know about the conversation. I thought you had left. So I was a little bit like, we were just getting going. And he's like, I can do better. Let's go do something else. I didn't understand. So that's a great example of a fairly dysfunctional little group where two people who are incredibly close.
Right.
That can be interrupted by a conversation that breaks the faith of the whole thing. That for everybody involved.
So let's go deeper.
Oh,
because because I think one of the things that made that hard was that we resisted the natural roles. So you always said, oh man, I don't want to be the executive director. Like we're equals. We're equals.
Yes.
You always tried to keep it flat.
Yes.
But you were the executive director.
In name only, maybe.
Well, that's what you kept saying, but it turned out to be true. And you said it over and over. And this is just what we have to be. It's just the structure. Yeah. We're doing this together. We're building this together. We've built this together from the driving around and picking up food. Look what we're building. So fine. Wasn't until you were no longer a fit that I started to feel better. So
for the audience here.
So I was like, oh, maybe he was telling me the truth. Neither one of us were a fit.
I got invited to a conversation at a coffee shop. Mm-hmm. And same thing. It was like this or that. Okay, good. I'm glad you agree. We're letting you go. Now, letting me go at that point was not a huge deal. It was about being asked to depart something that you were helping to build, that you were helping to make, that you were getting so much out of. It was such an important part of your growth.
I think that's what hurt the most, I think, is that we were doing this thing and then we were told that we had to have structure around it in order to get more money, and that all made sense, and to get donations and to be legit. And so we had to have a board, and then we had to figure out, well, who's going to be on the board, and then all the right people who needed to be on the board. And they were good people. They're all good people.
They did, and they shared the values.
They shared the values.
They loved the community.
What they didn't know is that you were like firing me from life.
Yeah.
And I could not understand that piece.
Yeah.
Like, it was a HR approach that gutted, because it wasn't about losing the money, because we were barely making any. That was fine. And it turns out maybe that's why we weren't a fit. If the job is to go and bring in money, and we were just happy to bring in bread, at some point we were going to get fired. Fair enough.
And he means literal bread.
Yeah.
Like, that's no money. We're bringing in bread. You mean money? No. Loaves of
let's go pick up stale bread and green peppers, and we'll make something. Mm-hmm. And I get it now, looking back, painful time. But when I think about it, being asked to exit a job wasn't as hard as exiting that community, that team. And then feeling like I couldn't come back, and feeling the shame associated with, well, I was here last week and now I'm not here, and I can't say goodbye. And that's really hard. And so I've thought about that exit a lot over the years, not in a way that makes me bitter, just in a way that helps me frame up exiting communities and maybe how to do that better.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, I got to get back to, I need a better response to my daughters when they share something and I reflect on it and I'm making it about me.
I just don't know how. I do not know how. I was going to say, I don't know how you're supposed to not, but maybe that's an internal monologue. Like, maybe it's not processing it in that moment with them.
Oh, okay. It could just be as simple as just quietly listening to
holding space.
The problem is, if I don't talk about it, I don't remember it.
Yeah, true.
And I think it's really important. So that's the thing. When somebody says something really important, I'm like, okay, how do I make that, personalize it, own it? Because I'll never believe it's important unless it is connected to my identity, right? Everything in my life that's important is about how I perceive myself, or hope I'm perceived, right? Or how it can help me from being seen. So I have my secret self, my private self, my public self. I want you to see me this way. I want to be understood this way, and I never want anybody to know about this part, the secret part. But that usually involves me talking about it, whatever it is. Yeah. But I don't want to feel, I just am trying to avoid that. No, Jarvis just makes it all about himself. He never even heard what I said, because I do that too. I can't tell the difference between that moment and something. Well, how do you do it?
I've not really reflected on it. Maybe folks would say I don't do that, but I try to slow it down. I try to listen, think about it.
Yeah.
But I think you're right that if you don't talk about it or you don't process it in some way, did I ever tell you my mom's 3 rules about saying something?
No.
I hate giving her credit for this, but she hits me with this, and I said this for a long time.
Just for everybody, Jacob loves his mom.
I do. I love her very much,
really
except
crazy. Yeah.
I can't. Yes, what she says about when to speak. Does it have to be said? Does it have to be said right now? And does it have to be said by you? And unless you have all three conditions, you should shut up.
Okay, so that is exactly what I feel like is happening, but I didn't start doing it until my 50s. And we're walking along, and I'm walking with three women who I'm connected to, like, because they're my daughters and a partner. And we're
Mhm.
walking along, and I think I've gotten to your mom's place of, do you have to, what were they again?
Does it have to be said? Does it
Does
have
it
to be said by you? And does it have
Uh-huh.
to be said right now?
So, yes, run through this really quickly. Like, because one of my weird things is I get a lot of value by contributing information or what I perceive as insight to a conversation. So, like a fact or this or that, you endure it all the time. And
We all
so,
do on the call. Sorry, keep
automatically, we're
going.
walking along and somebody will say something, and I'll say, "Oh, yeah, did you know, yada, yada." Or, "What about this? And is there another perspective?" Okay, it didn't need to be said. Didn't need to be said by me for sure. And didn't be said right now. So now people are saying, now I feel like I'm that quiet, that quiet man who doesn't ever say anything. He just, watches Fox News and plays golf by himself kind of thing and talks to other men. I don't know where I'm getting at, but
Well, I do think part of the work of being, or it is work, right? It's this conscious incompetence. Like when we know we're stepping into dangers, I do think we have to not spout off that privileged spot that we have to just, hey, I'm speaking. Why isn't everyone listening?
right.
Maybe it is time to slow down some
Yeah,
of
you don't
those
have to run
things.
to the mic every time. Yeah.
Well, certainly not us. There are voices that don't get heard as much.
Yeah.
And so I think if that's one of the things helping to slow you down, which is a deep commitment to hearing diverse perspectives and making sure that if we're trying to make conversations more accessible, then we want to make sure that we're removing the barrier to that, and that could be us.
It could be, yes. And
So create space,
yeah.
speak, slow it down. It
Yeah.
might be hard. Resist the impulse or the natural um, space that we have to just jump in because,
Yeah.
well, why wouldn't everyone want my opinion?
Yeah, and obviously you don't use the word opinion in your own internal mind. You're like, why wouldn't everybody want me to be included? That's what you think. Why wouldn't everybody want me to be a part of the conversation? Why are they happy to just have me walk with them for 15 minutes? And of course they're not. But the thing that I started to add that is really interesting is the internal conversation. So going back to your mom's three
Yeah.
amazing rules. Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? And does it need to be said now?
Mm-hmm.
The one that I find myself ruminating on in my quiet listening as the conversation goes on beyond me now or to the next thing or whatever is, what was it about what I was going to say that was important to me? Like what?
Yeah.
So in taking the other side of the perspective, they're just commiserating on empathy and felt emotions and that, and what it would be like to be in that. And then I'm going to somehow give, yeah, but you have to understand in certain situations, blah, blah, blah. Why did I want to say that? Was I weirdly defending something? Do I act that way? So it's been interesting because it doesn't mean that you're not conversing. It just means that there's an opportunity to maybe ask a really interesting question, which is, why did it feel so urgent to say it?
Yeah. I think asking that question is important. I also think there's some quality of facilitation that we can build into our relationships. So I have some great colleagues who just embody this, probably because the work that we're doing is facilitating restorative conversations on a regular basis. But if I'm in a conversation and I'm quiet and I'm trying to either listen or create space, or maybe I'm just not feeling very confident in being able to contribute anything,
Yeah.
I do appreciate it that some of my colleagues will stop and say, you've been quiet. So what are you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
So they invite me to participate in certain ways. And so there are ways to be, and they're asking themselves, who haven't I heard from? Who could contribute to make this better?
Mm-hmm.
If we're building this, if we're doing sense making together, part of our commitment is to hear from all the voices here.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure. And I could say easily, no, I'm just listening. I don't have anything to contribute. But now I've been attended to. Someone's invited me to participate. I've used the agency to not actually contribute, but to stay in a listening posture, which is still participating. I've found it helpful to start thinking about it in those ways too. It helps me slow down. It gives me something else to do in my head instead of rushing to jump in and speak. Have we heard from everyone? Is it now? Is it now? Should I? No, let's get some more perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
It's something else to do while I'm trying to create space to then attend to whose voice haven't we heard? So if you're walking with 3 people and only one is talking, maybe the next thing you say is to one of the others, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of jumping in with, well, here's what I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think you're really good at that. And I think what do you think is a very interesting contribution to a conversation, because, speaking is such a small part of a conversation.
Huge.
The listener is doing a lot more work than the speaker. And I got to check this out again, but I was looking at this thing that was coming out of neuroscience that was talking about our speech patterns. And when I start to speak, I basically only have a general vague notion of a direction that I want to go in. I haven't thought through the argument. I don't know what my last sentence is going to be. When I write a blog, before I put it up, I see the front, I see the end, I see we do not talk that way before we present it to others. We just launch right in, and it is whatever it is. And it turns out that the vague notion of the direction is about all we consciously control. The rest is a system of very fast algorithms of predicting.
Reading. Yeah.
Yes. So we're saying the most likely next word. Your brain does it almost automatically, like your heart beating, and it just puts out this language that you can kind of interact with, but it is a lot of it's pre-conscious, right? So it's a predictive model of language, which is exactly what ChatGPT is. Which is ironic that we would build a machine that works like our own brains, but that actually doesn't seem that ironic at all in a way. So I didn't know where I was going to end up. And if you've ever been me, and I don't know that you can imagine what that's like, but you'll stop at some point and go, shoot, what were we talking about? Yeah. Right? That kind of, your brain will take you down paths and continue things like I'm doing right now. I wanted to stop talking about 2 minutes ago. I have to keep going now for some unknown reason. And all of this, if I just say, what do you think about that? Or internalize, go, what was going on? Just to take a look at the whole blog and read it myself before I share it with anybody else is a really interesting practice. But it is not how we've evolved. If we just start talking, that's not exactly how our brains work.
It makes a lot of sense.
Did I end up where I hoped I was going to end up with that language?
It does make sense, and I think we have to have different modes of communication and pace of communication depending on the context. So if it's more urgent, we're shorter with each other. I need this right now. And so when we're up against deadlines, the way we talk to each other changes. When we're doing emergency management, and we're discussing what needs to happen next, the phrases are short, the communication is more direct. It's easier for people to get offended because, yes, someone's telling you what to do. You're going to do this, you're going to do this next, you're going to report back. We need this so we shorten it. There's not a whole lot of time for, what do you think about this? So there's in incident command or emergency scene management, this is one of those core principles of clear, direct communication. It works really well if the relationships are strong. If everyone has a clear sense of purpose, what are we trying to do? What's the mission today? The communication can be short and quick. When you're a little bit vague on what are we trying to do, or why are you talking to me that way? How come you get to make all the decisions? Who died and made you incident commander?
I ask that of you all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Yep.
So,
that was the job I got after you fired me, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah. I failed up in the world somehow.
Just for the record, I did not know, nor was I a part of any firing.
Well, I believe that now. I came to believe that. I just didn't believe that in the moment. Which why would I? It seemed like a massive betrayal,
exactly.
And then I did what I do, is I just retreated. Some people would like show up at your house and smash out every window. That's not me.
No, you're peace loving.
I'm just like,
you withdraw.
You're dead to me.
Yep. Yes.
I definitely
withdraw and burn everything to the
ground. Everything down. Everything goes. And which is a painful way to go through life because it isolates and we lost out on good time together, which I regret. But I can't change my default position.
No,
that's where I go. That is where I go now. That is where I will go forever. When I'm hurt, I withdraw. I'm out. I'm done.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah.
Not this podcast, but I just know that about myself. So
right. And with the theme this season of revisiting ourselves in the past and checking in to say, obviously I didn't like that about me. I regret that, but can I be okay with that? Or what do I do with that now? Or like you just said, that default is still there. It's not like I may be better at seeing it, negotiating with it, but that part, if we're using internal family systems therapy, that part, it gets a good meal and is very active to this day.
I think I reset faster now though, because I know it.
Okay.
Right. So back then I wouldn't have articulated it as that. I probably would take space to protect myself, to be angry so I don't lash out and make things worse because it's burning anger. Like I get really angry. And when I get really angry, I have to withdraw because I know if I stay, I'm going to make it worse. But it ends up eating me because I'm now without community.
I've never seen you really angry.
It's because I leave.
Yeah.
It's because I leave. But I have now learned I need to reset faster. And I need to have different strategies to reset faster to bring me back into community because I won't function well when I'm off on my own.
Right. Exactly.
I can't.
No, because the story you tell yourself. Yeah, exactly. If you had removed yourself and never reconnected, you would be left with a misperception of actually what happened and your my relationship. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should look at talking to our parts and how our parts, like how you or anybody could check in quicker. Just the basic sense of, because I like to think that it was my past self, but my past self still lives here, and it's just learning how to live with it.
I recognize. Yes, I think that's right. So I'm not as fast on figuring out the situation as I am at reading this doesn't feel right. I can't stay here. Like I will come to rationalize out what about the situation is making me angry? What about this is making me sad? What about this?
Yeah.
But I recognize angry and sad. I recognize this place. I've been here before. I don't like being here. I need to reset, and then I can think.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Let's start with that on the next episode or an upcoming episode. When you get those signals, how do you work with yourself? Like that will be a fascinating conversation, and I will like to explore a little internal family systems therapy on that. It'll be fun.
It's felt like that today. Unpacking my firing.
Yeah, that was fun conversation. Oh, man. I'm going to tell myself.
You owe me 2 weeks' pay, by the way.
Oh, really?
2 weeks of bread or whatever it is that we're bringing in.
Green peppers and
because broccoli. I stormed out with a take off. I don't care. Now, with interest, 20 years later.
That's a whole year's worth of sliced white bread.
Sounds good.
See you next time.